Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 11th Digital Live of 2026. My name is Lale, one of the field managers here at the Digital Summer Clinic, also joined by my co-host, Zach, another field manager. And we're very excited today to be talking to Ann Arbor SPARK Senior Vice President of Entrepreneurial Services, Bill Meyer.
Hello. Nice
Yeah.
to see you guys.
Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us tonight. And we're really looking forward to this conversation. If anybody watching has a question for Bill that they would like to get answered, drop it in the chat. Whichever you are watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, drop your questions in the chat for Bill. We will answer them in the Q&A portion at the end of the live tonight. So to just kick things off, Bill, would you mind just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your professional experience?
Sure. As stated previously, my name is Bill Mayer, and I joined Spark right at the very end of 2010. And before working for Spark, I had been doing consulting work, sort of helping different Spark clients, primarily on the financial side of what they were trying to do. But if you rewind even further, I mean, I've had 5 startups myself, and one included it was a startup that really worked with investments. I was sort of managing a portfolio and doing a lot of direct placements of private capital rounds. So I've been both an operator doing, sales, marketing, strategy. I've been helping other entrepreneurs raise capital and, make good, smart, strategic decisions. And that's sort of what got me connected to Spark originally. And it was very comfortable coming in and starting to help the entrepreneurs. And I guess I was doing okay because they hired me in 2010 to run the entire program. And when I started, it was 3 people, and I was the only person that would counsel clients. And if you fast forward today to 2026, I've got a team of a dozen people that work hard every day to try and provide resources, advice, and support to the scalable technology and innovation-based startups that Spark works with.
Thank you for sharing that. I saw when I was doing some research about you, I saw that you have a lot of experience with startups. So it's really cool that prior to your role at Spark that you were already kind of in the community a lot. So you just bring a lot of great experience to the platform, and I appreciate that. So we're going to ask a couple questions to help us and the audience get to know you a little bit better. So our first question is, from your perspective, what role does the Digital Summer Clinic play in supporting startups at Spark?
Oh, I appreciate that question. So before the Digital Summer Clinic existed, we're trying to help startups. We're trying to get them the resources they need, depending on what area of the business needs attention, or maybe they don't have someone on the team that's good. Oh, let's choose marketing, for example. You may have a founding team that's a really skilled, smart business person and a really skilled, smart engineer, but they don't know how to do marketing. And that was proven to us because we survey our clients every year and we ask them, are we doing everything? Do we have everything you need? Are we doing the right things, or the things that, additional things you could use that would help you in growing your business? And the first thing everyone always says is, well, we need more money, right? We need more capital. But once you get past that one, it's usually sales and marketing are the 2 biggest ones. And marketing was really standing out as something where the startup companies that we help were saying, I need marketing help, but the large companies that provide that service are too expensive. They don't quite understand companies at the very early stage. So Professor Gibson and I, who were going to the same gym at the time, sort of put our heads together. And I said, I have a problem. You're a marketing professor. You have students. Is there a way that we could take this lack of available professionals in our marketplace, our ecosystem, and maybe give them some on-the-job training and teach them? So, you come out of school and, you may have taken some marketing classes, but you might not necessarily be far enough along that someone say, I want to hire you for a great salary today. And so to bridge that gap, we thought, well, what if we helped students spend a summer doing project-based work, working with a startup, really getting some certifications and getting some projects under their belt that would demonstrate I have the ability to do these things. And then a company might say, you know what, why don't we take a chance on this person? They've done some good things. Why don't we train them the rest of the way? And we'll do that by hiring them. And so when we first launched, we didn't know if this was going to work or not. And it turns out we were able to match some great companies with some great students. And keep in mind, I have no expectation that everyone in this world would love working for an early stage technology company. I do personally. I think it's really exciting and really interesting. And the thing that really stuck out to me is, let's say you joined, I don't know, Ford in their marketing department. How many hundreds or thousands of marketing professionals they have? You're not really going to be able to have your hands on the steering wheel with regards to standing up a really interesting project and implementing it from start to finish. So it really struck me, and luckily Professor Gibson agreed, that this might be a very interesting, kind of holistic exposure to what this could look like. And as it turns out, that part was true. But the thing that we still have to be sensitive to for students that are in the clinic is, if you're an employee number 4, 5, 6 at a startup company, if they turn into Facebook or they turn into Google, you're a genius, right? But those early days are kind of, I don't want to say chaotic. Let's just call it exciting. And some people really thrive off of that. And some people say, wow, this is more unstructured than I'm used to. And so I really appreciate that the students that go through the summer clinic have that exposure. And whether it's right for you or wrong for you, or you have a question mark, you at least see what it's like to be working inside a small team. And based on our results, it seems like there's a insubstantial amount of people that actually enjoy working in that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say for me, when I was in the clinic as a intern, I think the most valuable part of it was just that hands-on exposure that you necessarily wouldn't get with like a Ford or a Google. You're like really, you feel like you're contributing to things, and that's the biggest part of it. So
yeah, and so the original question was, what value does this clinic bring to Spark? Our mission is to help these early stage companies be successful, help them find the resources they need. The students that participate in the clinic, those are really the resources that are incredibly helpful to the startup companies. And, they don't have to hire the student necessarily full time. I mean, they can, and that does happen. But, if they can accomplish something really meaningful that helps the startup get extra sales, raise a round of capital, achieve some meaningful milestones for the startup, that's a huge win from Spark's perspective.
yeah, absolutely. So moving into our next question. So you've been at Spark, like you said, since 2010. So you've seen a lot
It's been a while.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of these companies come in that need help with things. So how has the Digital Summer Clinic contributed to growth for these startup companies? And specifically, like, do you have like one or two stories of like startups that like stand out?
Well, I tend to observe patterns, and that's what I try and craft programs on. If I start by looking at the program has become more sophisticated and more efficient, and it's doubled in size. So it is very important to me that we didn't decrease quality as we increase the volume of students going through. And we're sitting at 48 students every summer, which feels pretty good with 24 companies. So, back in the day, it was sort of, okay, companies, what projects do you have for us? And we sort of evaluated those projects. As we've gotten more sophisticated, one of the things that I've observed that I really like about the program is the students and the teaching team have a more keen eye to what's going on with the company. The company may come in and say, we just need a website, build us a website. And if you really sort of look critically at the company, and every startup that's supported by Spark has an account manager. And if you talk to the account manager, you realize, okay, these people are saying they need to do sales, but actually they don't have a strategic marketing plan. They don't really understand their go-to-market, and their website, the language on there is, doesn't make sense. Like, if somebody goes to the website and they're like, I don't know what they do. It's not compelling. The visuals aren't compelling. So it's really enjoyable to me when the startup sort of, puts their hat in the ring to take 2 students, they get accepted, the students are matched to the company, and then they start to get into the project and they realize, wow, there's a bunch of things that we actually didn't know were wrong. or we didn't know that we could improve upon, or, something happens during the project and they're like, quick, we need to stand up this, we need to build some videos, we need to do some things for this customer sale or for this opportunity or what have you. So that's been the most interesting part to me. I can think of, we had a company, an entrepreneur named Grace, and her company was Warmaloo. And, love her to death, but she thought that everything was good. She would just take some, students on as kind of a nice project. Good thing to do, give back, right? Turns out they uncovered like half a dozen things that were not on Grace's radar, specifically around that language part. You go to a website, you want it to be visually compelling yet minimal, informative yet not overwhelming. All the things you need to find that balance point of this like sort of user experience that people have. And she thought she was good, but these students turned out to come up with all these sort of language improvements and different visuals and created videos, like I said, helped stand up an e-commerce component. That's a lot easier today. This was a while back. And she was just thrilled that not only did the students come in, but the teaching team really provided valuable input that said, well, have you thought about this? Are you familiar with what this is being done over here? Have you thought about that for your company? And she said, no, I had no idea. So that's a bit of the iterative process that I find to be really useful with the summer clinic.
That's great. I think everything you spoke on is kind of a universal experience for a lot of us interns, because we think we're going to be doing one thing, but then as we get deeper into the weeks, it's like, oh, okay, it kind of like switches into more newfound projects, which is amazing because that means, again, we get to continue the hands-on experience. And I think what you spoke on kind of leads perfectly into our next question, which is, why is it important for startups to work with student interns at such an early age?
Yeah, and if I can just ask you, Lala, if what you just said about you thought you were doing one thing, turns out you needed to do something else. Something tells me you enjoyed the experience of working with an early stage company. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it because I feel like if I was to work with a company that was more established, has been around longer, I wouldn't have been able to do as much things I wanted to do or try as many projects as I would have liked. I feel like I would have been kind of confined in the restraints of like the creativity because I like social media, so that's what I worked on
Hmm.
predominantly. So I feel like I just wouldn't have gotten to try new creative things such as intertangling pop culture within my app's company as I would have liked. So I definitely valued the experience. And it's always nice to be a part of the early stages of something as they grow because you get to say you were there for the beginning. So I loved it.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate you answering that question for me because I was really reading into what you were saying. Sometimes you get the people who are like, whoa, this wasn't in my job description. And, that's not really a mindset that does well in startups. Usually it's, oh, awesome. We have a new challenge to tackle. We have a new problem to solve. And if you get excited by that, then yeah, you'll love early stage technology companies. And that then, going to your next question, Zach, why is it important for our early stage companies to engage with students? Number one, if I can just sort of channel Lale and her excitement around doing this type of work, it can be hard. Sometimes people that are like mid-career that, have a lot of already established habits and a lot of, sort of predetermined outlooks on things. Students are great because you guys, you're just like, you have fresh minds. You're very open-minded and you're very problem solving, oriented. You're very creative. And, that's really helpful in the early stage company space. You're like, moldable clay. We can just teach you and you just grab onto it and run with it. The other thing, and this is a real benefit for the companies, is if there's a great candidate, like let's say we're trying to hire Zach, and I'm a startup company that's got $100,000 a year of revenue, and Microsoft is recruiting you. The idea that, am I going to be able to pay you more than Microsoft? Probably not. Am I going to be able to create an amazing experience for you that you wouldn't be able to get at Microsoft? Yeah, I think we could win on that. So, this idea of, number one, we focus on our local Washtenaw County companies. That's a bit of a head start for students and companies. You don't have to, move to New York or California. And then, the other thing is just this idea that the talent that we have here locally, we'd love it if we could convince you to stay here. Now, we can't make you stay here, right? And we don't want to make you stay here. However, if there's a great career for you here in Washtenaw County, or somewhere else in the country, we just kind of want like a fighting chance to retain you, because these graduating students are incredibly useful to our business community. And what you do in 2026 may be totally different than what you do in 2028, 2030. Boy, that sounds like it's a lot farther away than it actually is. So you have this sort of career journey. And so, if we can help you get started on that career journey, because Professor Gibson, he told me a story and it's really stuck with me. He actually tells it sometimes, where he'd have this incredibly talented student and he'd think, man, this person's going to go on, and like run an investment bank. And then, he bumps into them working at like Best Buy or a coffee shop or things like that. And no judgment against that. But the question was, hey, you really seem passionate about marketing. Why didn't you pursue that? And the answer was usually, well, I couldn't get anyone to hire me. And so I feel like the summer clinic really kind of blows that model up, in that, you don't have to put on an awkward suit. You don't have to shake hands and do 10 interviews, to get an internship kind of thing. Because we've got the faculty teaching team, because, the students in this clinic are vetted, they're screened. These companies just say, you know what, I trust the system, let's give it a shot. And so 48 students get what I consider to be a really good opportunity. But for the summer clinic, I just don't know if that opportunity would be there. It would be there for some people, but this is a great way. And internships are a huge pathway for companies to get to know, employees, candidates before they hire them full time. So, if you really look at from the company position, they're always struggling to find great people. We've got great people. They just might happen to be a junior or senior in college. So if you can meet them before they graduate and get to know them, and they learn the mission of the company. A lot of these companies are doing really cool work that the mission actually is, something people can really sink their teeth into and get excited about. That's the formula. That's kind of how we sort of make this all work on a large scale.
No, definitely. I think the fact that once you're in the digital summer clinic, it is a community, it is kind of like a new home, and those connections take you far. Because I know for me, I interned with this guy named Max, founder of Kiss App, and me and Zach.
Exactly.
Yeah, we signed up for a business competition at Eastern, and Max actually won it. So we kind of asked him for some tips, and he said whenever we want to get together to get his insights, we can. And it's just because we kind of built that foundation through the digital summer clinic. And I know that's the same thing for a lot of other people that have participated.
Yeah.
So now, oh, did you have
Good.
something you want to add?
I was just going to say, Kiss App is their mission is effectively, to prevent sexually transmitted infections, to make the world safer, to make our population not contract disease, and all of that. So did that mission really, did that get you excited about, what you were, yes, you were doing social media, but the greater good that you're imparting, was that material for you?
It definitely was, because before I interned with Max, I didn't know that much about STDs, and just, I always knew they were dangerous, but I just didn't know to the extent, or, the numbers of how affected people were, especially in my own community, by them.
Mm-hmm.
So just the fact of like what their mission is, it's out there to help people and spread more awareness for people to practice safe sex. It did feel like I was a part of something bigger, because, you're trying to keep everyone protected and safe, and it's through such a creative way that I would have never thought was possible.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for sharing that. The big moonshot that we're working on, and we have companies that are working on this, is curing cancer, right? But it's a whole spectrum going down of, therapeutic drugs for diseases, things that are helping people's, mental health and well-being. So I don't know about you guys, but having that kind of impact on the world is what, makes me wake up in the morning excited.
No, I think it's the same for us too. And so now we are entering our Q&A section. We don't have any questions right now. So Zach, do you have any?
I do have a question. So just tell us a little bit about your 5 startups and how they like helped you kind of shape what you're doing now.
Okay, thank you for asking that because I enjoy telling the stories. But I don't want to keep repeating myself. So honestly, my first startup was not a tech startup. I needed quickly to figure out a way to pay for college. Some things shifted inside my financial situation, and boy, I need to do something. And there wasn't really. This was way back in the 90s. So there wasn't really entrepreneurship curriculum being taught. I was at U of M at the time, but I mean, I don't know that anyone was teaching entrepreneurship. And so a good friend of mine and I were kind of scratching our heads and we said, something has always bugged us about the dormitories at U of M, and I bet they're the same at EMU. And that is these people would buy these lofts and you'd sort of like bring them into the room and they'd kind of shake back and forth and they're really poor quality. And we thought, what if we could build a loft that we guaranteed would not move? It was just completely rock solid. And so we did that. I mean, it wasn't massive engineering. It was actually kind of a right time, right place opportunity because I was head of sales. And so I would just on move-in day, I would be out there with flyers, putting them in the parents' hand. Your kid deserves to sleep well at night. Your kid deserves a good desk underneath that the loft isn't going to fall down on. And it's the first day of school, so like anything for my kid. So both myself and my partner at the time, his name was Art, we paid for our entire college building lofts for the first 2 months of the school year. And then we had 6 employees and we actually sold it in our senior year to another company that kind of made the crappy lofts. And so they wanted the branding and reputation and they did it for a number of years and then, they kind of fell apart, but that had nothing to do with us. So that kind of put the bug in my mind where I was thinking, okay, well, I can work for someone or I can create a place to work. And so, that really got me thinking. And so the next thing that I did, I was one of the founders on, it was an optics company. And you've probably seen glasses where you walk outside and they just get darker. Okay, so those are photochromatic and reactive lenses. Before those existed, there was technology out of the University of Michigan that if you take 2 polarized lenses and rotate them against each other, they will get darker or lighter based on the gradient of the treatment. And so we designed this little worm gear up here with a dial on the side. It was called the sundial, and you could just go zoop, it would get darker, move it down, it would get lighter. So it was manually controllable darkness sunglasses called the sundial. Our lab and our manufacturing facility was on Jackson Road in Ann Arbor. So that went really well, and we were acquired by a rival optics company, and that was great. And then I didn't technically found this one, but there were 3 different organizations in Ann Arbor that were doing, basically software development, and it was the nascent stage today, what we call UI UX, user interface, user experience. Before that term existed, it was called information architecture. And so the leading information architecture company in the nation was called Argus Associates here in Ann Arbor. It was a guy named, it was Lou and Pete, Peter Morville and Lou Rosenfeld. And so basically we had the front end user experience team. There was a team called Interconnect that total backend, like full stack. And then Q Multimedia and Alan Creek Design. And so we sort of took these 4 companies and merged them into one master company called Allied Studios. And I led the sales and marketing. With the merger and sort of standing up this new entity, I sort of was the only person that was dedicated to the overlying organization. And this is going to sound crazy, but back in the day, if you were going to a conference or an event, you didn't have an option to register online. You would just fill out your form and mail it in. That's kind of how things worked. So we broke the internet when we created an online registration system for back in the day. Have either of you been to Google's campus out in Mountain View?
No.
No? Okay, random question. Well, let's say hypothetically we were in Mountain View, California, and we pulled up into Google's campus. That used to be occupied by a company called Silicon Graphics. And they built these workstations where like they were the ultimate in, doing like digital animation back in the day, which was the highest compute power. And so, or demand anyway. And so, and Google is like a hermit crab. The buildings still look the same. It's really funny. But Silicon Graphics did an annual conference for their users called SIGGRAPH. And that's where we launched the first online registration system for SIGGRAPH. It was brilliant. It worked really well. Our people, the Silicon Graphic users, they loved it. They signed up, they registered. So the challenge was to see if we could roll that out to the rest of the nation. And as what happens with a lot of startups, we were too early. People did not trust registering online.
Yeah.
They're like, this is crazy. I'm not putting my credit card into a web browser. Are you nuts? So we had some limited success, but honestly, we just couldn't keep. We would have people buy from us, and their members. It was a lot of associations wouldn't use the tool as much. It would be like 98% mail, 2% web, and they're like, why are we paying for this? So we ended up winding the company down. It was okay. We learned a lot, all of that, as one does. And then I also have run basically an investment fund, like I talked about, helping people. I was doing some publicly traded stuff as a hedge, but mostly it was doing placement of private capital rounds for companies that were, looking to raise capital to grow. And I do a lot of sort of strategic consulting too about, product market fit, sales strategy, growth strategy, all of that. So yeah, it was sort of an interesting blend of different industries and different things that I've done to kind of give me a diverse background in, and I sold that one too, by the way. So that and one ended up being a nice success. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my journey. Yeah, am I forgetting one? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so that's sort of how I built the skill set. But I really enjoyed that consultative piece, and that's what got me working with the Spark companies. And the Spark companies, really I enjoyed, which is how I ended up at Spark.
Thank you for in-depthly telling us about our journey. A common theme I noticed surrounding it is that you have that self-starter mentality, which is a lot of things when potential interns are asking us, what do you guys look for? That's what we tell them. We look for self-starters and people that are willing to take the initiative. And I love that. That's what you embody everything that the startup culture is. So thank you for sharing that with us. So we are towards the end of our digital live. I just want to say thank you again to everyone who joined us today.
Yeah, and a big thank you to Bill Mayer. It was great having you on today. Be sure to stay up to date on our digital lives. We have 2 remaining this year. One is next week at 5:30 p.m. It's an old field manager, so be prepared for be ready to see a familiar face, guys. So yeah, we'll see you guys then. Thank you guys for watching.
Bye.
Thank you.